everyone. Welcome to our Summer Survival Series. Today's webinar is being co-sponsored by Wilton SEPTA. Our topic today is teaching safety smarts, how to wear a face mask. We all know how uncomfortable this accessory can be for us. Just imagine what it would be like for our kiddos to adapt to wearing one in the hot summer months and then when they go back to school. So this is going to be a very important lesson. We're so lucky to have Justyna Balzar and Meghan Cave back with us again for this lesson. They're both board certified behavior analysts with master's degrees in education. They are also the co-founders of the Hangout Spot, and you can find more information about them on our website at www.spednetwilton.org. Also, all the information from today's webinar will be posted to our Facebook page and also to our website. And that includes the paperwork that you see on the screen. Your moderators today are Eve Kessler, founder of SpedNet Wilton, Carolina Corrigan, co-president of SpedNet Wilton, Kara Berghaus of Wilton SEPTA, and I'm Janine Kelly. Just a couple ground rules for anyone who's new to this webinar. Please feel free to ask questions at the end of their presentation through the Q&A button. Don't use the chat because the Q&A button helps us figure out whose questions have already been answered. Also be mindful that this is an open forum that's being recorded and we can't guarantee confidentiality. So when you do ask your questions, just make sure not to reveal any private information. And lastly, like I said, the documents and information provided in this webinar by the moderators are for informational purposes only and are not intended to replace the need for legal or therapeutic advice. All information and paperwork will be shared on our website and our Facebook page. So with that being said, I'll turn you over to Justyna and Meghan.
Hi everyone, we're really excited to be talking to you about safety smarts, how to wear a mask. Uh-oh, my arrow's not working, there we go. So before we dive in, we do have some important information that we want to share with you. First off, we'd like to share that the Hangout Spot takes no official position on mask wearing. This webinar was created as a result of an outpouring of family requests for tips and strategies on how to teach children to be more comfortable with mask wearing for parents who decide that that is the best choice for their family. Governor Ned Lamont did issue an executive order which does state that any person in a public space in Connecticut who is unable to or does not maintain a safe social distance of approximately 6 feet from every other person shall cover their mouth and nose with a mask or face covering. In this order also exists mask wearing exemptions for individuals whose health conditions do not allow it, for children under the age of 2, and for people for whom wearing a mask poses a risk to their safety. So for more information on the details of this order, you can click on the hyperlinked text in the webinar once that goes live. It should also be noted that the tips and strategies outlined here are general in nature, and the process of desensitizing a loved one to mask wearing is slow, requires patience and repetition. So if you decide that mask wearing is the right option for your family, your loved one exhibits severe problem behaviors in response to mask wearing, we recommend seeking professional assistance on best ways to help keep you, your family, and your loved ones safe. So with that out of the way, let's dive in.
Great. So we wanted to start by first talking a little bit about the CDC recommendations. And Justyna just covered the Connecticut specific items here, but just to review, and I think this has become very common knowledge at this point, but the recommendation from the CDC is that we should be wearing cloth face coverings in public settings where other social distancing measures are difficult to maintain. And as you can imagine, children who are considered high risk or severely immunocompromised are especially encouraged to wear masks for protection. And Justyna talked about the local orders. Now, we know from working with our kids, right, that this can be extremely uncomfortable. It can be scary because this is something different. And I know I myself have a particular aversion to all things medical. So now to be living in a world where everybody looks like they're walking around in medical gear, it's scary and it's nerve-wracking and it leads to anxiety. As behavior analysts, when we talk about this, we think about how uncomfortable, scary situations can lead to escape behaviors. right? So that might look like children trying to remove their masks, or it can look more intense than that, right? It can look like tantrums. It can look like aggression. It can look like self-injurious behavior. So as we talked about before we got started here, the process of teaching children to wear and tolerate a mask, particularly for those who perceive this to be a very, very aversive experience, requires really thoughtful, really patient teaching. And it's going to take some time. So this is not going to be an overnight learning experience for our kids. And with that in mind, as the world starts to slowly reopen, right, and we start to return to some kind of normal, you might have previously been able to manage day-to-day life without having to need to teach this skill, right? While you're staying in your home with your quarantine, as we call it. But now as the world is reopening, there may become increased needs as children start to socialize again to teach this skill. So definitely, first and foremost, starting sooner rather than later is going to increase the likelihood of success. If your child is a child who will be wearing a mask in public, or you've made the decision for your family that your child will be wearing a mask when they return to school, when that time comes, don't plan to start this process, the week before school starts. You really need to be forward thinking about it and plan with significant amount of time in advance. All right. So we're going to dive into our strategies here, and we've got quite a few that we're going to go through with all of you. The first big point here is one size does not fit all, and I can speak from personal experience related to this. So I was working with a child today whose mom wanted support in terms of helping the child to tolerate wearing a mask. And we had the mask, and we were ready to practice and earn fun things for wearing our mask. And the mask was huge in this little one's face. I mean, she's 5, right? So she has the teeniest, tiniest little face, and it was an adult-sized mask. So first and foremost, don't try to use adult-sized equipment on little faces. The reason for that is it's going to make the experience more uncomfortable, and that has the potential to elicit more severe escape behaviors. So you really want to make sure that you're using kid-size equipment on kids, adult-size equipment on adults, and adolescent-sized equipment on adolescents. That you really, really want to make sure that the fit is right from the start. So if you don't have the perfect fitting equipment yet, we don't encourage you to just start anyways with mom's mask or dad's mask, right? Because you're going to teach your child that this is what wearing a mask feels like. It feels really uncomfortable. It's too big. It's hanging off your face. You want your child to be as comfortable as possible from the start, and that requires using equipment that is the just right fit for your child from the very beginning of teaching. There were recommendations. Sorry, Justyna. One more point on that slide. There were recommendations out there for little ones. So as Justyna noted previously, there are exemptions for children under the age of 2. Some families have elected for infants, and they're concerned about the spreading of coronavirus from other people who may be around an infant. Using one of those baby carriers on your child's baby carrier, right, is a great alternative if that's something you're concerned about for your very little ones for whom it's not yet safe to wear masks. All right, now I'm ready. Okay, so you do not need to jump straight to a medical mask. We know that our kids, particularly some children with special needs, have certain textures or certain things that feel really good to them, and they have certain things that feel really bad to them. And we all have those things as well, right? So a medical mask can be perceived as particularly scary, and it may be perceived as particularly uncomfortable. So you may want to start out by thinking about using a do-it-yourself mask that is made out of a really cozy, familiar material. Think about favorite t-shirts that are worn and really comfy now, or favorite blankets, right, that you can cut a little corner out of and make a mask, or buy a second one and make a mask out of it. So anything that your child is already familiar with, they already like the way it feels. So transitioning from snuggling with that blanket or wearing that t-shirt that's gotten super soft over time, to having it near your face is going to be an easier transition. It's now summer, so this point becomes a little more challenging than when we had originally explored this topic with families a month or so ago, when it was ironically snowing in the middle of April and May. But children tend to be more familiar with wearing certain winter gear than wearing a mask, right? So if you have children who like to play in the snow, or they like to go skiing, and you can picture what I'm talking about, right? Those like neck warmers that come up to your nose to keep you warm when it's really cold outside. That, first of all, back when it was chilly, may have been a good alternative to wearing a mask. Right now, I can't imagine wearing winter gear out there in the 80-degree weather with a giant fleece thing over my nose and mouth, but it may be a good tool to use to teach your child, right? So when you're in the house, it's air conditioning, and your goal is to sensitize or desensitize your child to tolerating some kind of fabric near the face, and they're totally fine wearing that ski gear or that snow gear, start with that and practice with that until that kind of becomes normal in a comfortable scenario in your home in the air conditioning. And then you can transition from there on out to a mask that is going to be better suited for the warm weather we're about to encounter. And just as a reminder, the CDC recommendations are something is better than nothing, right? So I want to be abundantly clear here. This is going to be hard. This is going to be challenging. We recognize that. We know this is really stressful for families. And if you don't make it past this very step, that is okay, right? Because if you've made this decision for your family, the CDC says something is better than nothing. So making it here to being able to tolerate some kind of a do-it-yourself mask is a really significant accomplishment for those families who have made this decision. All right, next slide. So here we just wanted to share a little video from the CDC. I think we're probably all intimately familiar with how to create our own masks at this point. But I am noticing in some of my work with families, as I mentioned before, that families have a lot of masks for the adults who have been going out into the world and buying groceries and doing that essential business. And we haven't necessarily thought about getting equipment for our little ones yet, particularly our really little ones who have been at home. So we did want to just share this. This is available on the CDC website. There are many, many resources available now. So I'm sure you could do a quick Google search and come up with some great options. But this is a do-it-yourself guide to making your own mask out of some of those familiar materials we talked about.
Make your own face covering in a few easy steps with items you can find around the house, like an old scarf, a bandana or a hand towel, or you can make a face covering out of an old t-shirt. Fold it to the middle from the bottom, fold it to the middle from the top, fold it again to the middle from the bottom, and again from the top, and then 2 rubber bands, one on one side and one on the other side. Then you fold either side to the middle, and you have yourself cloth face covering. It's that easy.
It's that easy. So again, he showed it there with some familiar materials you'll find throughout your home. So pick something your child likes, pick something that's comfy, and start with that, okay? Okay, so the next strategy that we highly recommend is to decorate and personalize. So in the world of applied behavior analysis, which is the science of learning and behavior, the science that Justyna and I practice, there's an intervention called pairing. And the idea is that when you take something that you don't really like that much and you pair it with things that you like, the thing you don't really like starts to become a little bit more fun over time. And that's what we're trying to do here, right? So for a child who really doesn't like that mask, it's the worst thing that ever happened to them, and under no circumstances are they going to tolerate that thing near their face. You want to make that mask as fun, as engaging, as exciting as possible. And I am an adult, right? And my own mother did this process for me because I was not particularly thrilled when these recommendations came out and I realized I was going to have to walk around wearing a mask. So my mom made me the sweetest little mask with a giant bow on the corner, right? And that worked because I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So now I sport it in great fashion. The kids will do the same thing, right? So I've provided a couple examples here for you guys, but honestly, at this point, this is a booming industry. So you can go on Etsy, you can go on Amazon, eBay, all those websites. There are so many options out there. Give some thought to what your child really likes. For example, if your child loves Bugs Bunny, turn their face into Bugs Bunny. If your child is into animals, turn their face into animals. So now it becomes more like dress up than it becomes, oh, we have to wear this scary mask around because everybody is worried about getting sick. So there's really great options out there. These are just two of them, but you can find almost anything out there these days. So we highly recommend checking out something that's going to be fun and exciting for your individual child.
Okay, so you can also check out see-through masks. So some children rely on facial expressions to interpret or express their feelings. So limiting their ability to see and limiting their face where they're able to do that can be scary. We recommend checking out a couple of different resources on see-through masks. But again, as Meghan mentioned, it is a booming industry. So I'm sure if you Google it, you'll find many, many more options. But DHH Mask Project by Ashley Lawrence is a great site to check out see-through masks, and then also the clearmask.com. So Meghan already mentioned normalizing things. To be honest, on some level, we are all resistant to change. So normalizing and providing repeated exposure to something helps our children, helps us, quite frankly, get used to whatever that change is. So you can do this through a variety of different ways. One way Meghan already mentioned is the idea of playing dress up. So you can play dress up together and turn it into a game of being superheroes. You can dress up your child's stuffed animals and dolls as you're playing with your child. You can also model mask use. So anytime that you're going out of the house, make it a point to let your child know that, you know, when you're going to the grocery store, you're going to be putting your mask on, and you can show them exactly what that looks like. You can also show your child pictures of other children wearing masks. So that will help with buy-in, giving your child a sense that they're not alone, that they're not the only one who has to wear a mask, that there are other children out there who are doing the same thing when they're going out in those public places. You can also incorporate masks into drawing. So if you're drawing with your child, you drawing their favorite character or they're drawing their favorite character, you can add a mask in there and pair it that way. But normalizing is very, very important, as like I mentioned before, on some level, we are all resistant to change, and the best way to be okay with change is to have repeated exposures to examples that change isn't as scary as we make it out to be in our heads. Okay.
All right. So before we dive into the details of this, I do want to highlight this next section is meant only as an example. So all teaching as relates to the actual procedure you're going to use with your child should be individualized to fit your child's individual needs, okay? But what we've done here is we've taken the idea of wearing a mask and we've broken it down into, in this example, 8 steps. And what you would do is use this as your teaching intervention. So you're going to start at, say, step 1, okay? And you're going to work with your child on accomplishing step 1. And the way you're going to do that is by having your child earn access to something really, really exciting. So, think about what your child loves. Does your child love a certain YouTube video? Is extra TV time a really exciting thing? Is there a certain special snack that your child is very motivated by? So you really have to think of something that's going to be very motivating for your specific child. So you're practicing the steps, practicing step 1, which in this case is tolerating others wearing masks. And you practice it and you give your child access to that reinforcer contingent on them successfully completing this step. And you do that repeatedly until your child has managed this step without any problem behaviors several times in a row. Okay? The reason we say that is because if you move on too fast, right? So your child does step 1 the first time, they engage in some problem behavior, so you try it again. And this time it was okay, but there was a little bit of resistance and you decide to just, it's okay, we're gonna go to step 2 and just try it. You risk, I'm gonna use the word traumatizing, right? But basically the idea is you move too quick. You made the mask more aversive because your child had not yet mastered the easier step. So you want to move in progression from easy to hard, right? So you can see here tolerating others wearing masks, tolerating his or her own mask nearby, tolerating just touching the mask with your hands, tolerating wearing the mask around your neck like a necklace, but not on your face at all the way up to tolerating a mask being worn in accordance with the CDC guidelines. So you practice the step, you provide reinforcers, those really favorite things your child is super motivated by, contingent on successful performance of that step. And then after your child does that several times in a row without any problems, you move to the next hardest step. And you move systematically over time. In the beginning, you're starting with really, really short increments of time. Okay, we're talking just a second. All you have to do is handle it for just a second. And then slowly, once you reach this last step, you go from a second to a few seconds, to 30 seconds, to a minute, to 5 minutes, and you're gonna build up capacity over time, okay? We should not expect that children who, at this point, are not willing to tolerate any mask use at all, the first time you pull out this new fun accessory, are going to wear the mask around their mouth and nose for an extended period of time. That's an unrealistic expectation. So if we go to the next slide, Justyna and I did a little photo shoot because sometimes visuals are helpful, right? So as you can see here, this is, and again, just an example. So you would want to individualize this to where your child is at right now. Your child might already be handling other people wearing masks and masks nearby, and you might be able to start somewhere around step 3. But this is just a visual representation of the breakdown of those steps. So you can see in photo 1, I'm totally cool with my friend Justyna wearing her mask around me. She better not put it near me. She better not ask me to wear it. She better not do any of that. But if she wears her mask near me, I can handle that. Okay, that might be a big step for some children, right? It's children who may be returning to school or other programs and may have a medical exemption or may be under the age of 2, but really have a hard time when mom and dad are wearing masks. How are they going to handle it when other caregivers wear masks? So once your child has mastered this step, they've done it several times in a row, no problem at all. The next step is the mask is nearby, it's sitting next to me on the couch. Don't touch me with it. Don't put it in my hands. Don't come near me with it, but it's okay if it's near me. So I can tolerate the presence of the mask. In the next step, I'm feeling the mask with my hands. I'm getting familiar with what the fabric feels like, what the strings feel like. Also checking out some of those really cool designs, personalized decorations that are on it. And then the next step, I'm wearing it like a necklace. This is a big step, right? This is the first time that the mask is physically on my person at some point. So, you know, you may have to improvise. My mask that my mom made has straps that I can tie around my head. So if you have the kind with the ears, this step you may need to kind of create some accommodations so that you can practice it around the neck. Then I move it up, so just my chin is covered, but not my nose and mouth, so my breathing is not in any way obstructed. Then I handle having the mask cover my mouth. And finally, in the very last step, thumbs up, I've handled it. I'm wearing my mask in accordance with CDC guidelines. Okay,
Okay, so it's important, piggybacking off of what Megan was talking about, desensitizing, it's important to practice at home before you go out in public. So if your child finds the mask, the presentation of the mask aversive, just the mere presence of someone wearing it aversive, chances are if you try and go out in public and have your child wear a mask, it's going to fail. It's not going to be successful, and it may even be traumatizing. Traumatizing for both you and your child, and likely everyone else around if your child is having a massive meltdown as a result of not wearing the mask. So what we recommend is before you go public, practice at home. So use those steps that we outlined for you. Try and get your child comfortable with the presentation of the mask, with normalizing it. So seeing it on other people, using it in the context of play, seeing it on other children. That's really what's going to get you to the step that you can actually go out with your child in public and have your child willingly wear a mask. So again, don't try and push your child too far or ahead to a step where they're not comfortable, because at the end of the day, the experience is not only going to be traumatizing, but it's going to create, like Megan said earlier, the whole situation to be aversive. So you're not only going to have to start from step one again, just being able to tolerate being in the presence of a mask. It's going to take much longer to then move to that next step if your child has a traumatic experience. And finally, to preserve your child's dignity. So if we know that there's something that's going to set your child off or our children off, we want to try to mitigate and avoid those types of situations to the greatest degree possible while we teach replacement skills, so that when they are faced with that situation in the natural environment, they are more able to successfully handle that situation. Okay, turn it into a game. So this is something that everyone at some point has tried. I think everyone is familiar with the cleanup song and the magic that it does for preschool children and children in our homes to be willing to all of a sudden clean up their messy toys that they've scattered all over the family room. Similarly, most parents at some point have been familiar with the let's see who can go the longest without speaking game. It's amazing how turning things into a game, things that were previously no fun at all or aversive, can create a motivation for our children to then be able to show that or demonstrate that behavior. So similar to the let's see who can go the longest without speaking game, you can spin that off to let's see who can wear their mask the longest without taking it off. Another way of turning it into a game is to pretend that you're going out as a superhero on a mission. So you need to put on your costume and put on your mask in order to go to that grocery store so that no one can know who you are. So there's different ways and creative ways of turning something that's aversive into something less scary and quite frankly more fun, to not only just make the experience tolerable, but something that's fun and something that your child doesn't avoid. Okay. Provide rewards for mask wearing. So if mask wearing is something that's difficult, if the step of tolerating being near someone who's wearing a mask is difficult for your child, we want to reinforce the behavior that we want to see. So again, similarly to the idea of rewards that we spoke about in the previous webinar, rewards don't have to be something tangible. They don't have to be something huge, right? So you don't have to buy the newest PlayStation game for your child as a result of them wearing a mask one time. What people find reinforcing varies So it's important to pay attention to what is your child talking about? What are they moving towards? What are they asking to get access to? Some children are motivated socially, so praise is enough for them. Recognition that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing is enough of a reward, a reinforcer for them to continue doing that, engaging in that behavior. Some children may need a little bit more support. So you can think of creating some sort of token system, like if you're working on desensitization to the mask, your child's working on being okay with being in the presence of a mask, you can have some sort of chart and you can give your child a check every time, you know, they're in front, sitting next to a mask without engaging in some sort of problem behavior. Other children, it could be something as simple as one less chore to do during the day, or a few extra minutes of playing their favorite game, or a few extra minutes of staying up later, or their favorite TV show. So there's really many things out there that can reinforce the behavior of wearing a mask, or in general, any behavior that you would like to see more of, that aren't tangible in nature, that don't cost money, and quite frankly, all the behaviors that we engage in, good or bad, our good habits and our bad habits, are reinforced in our world around us, because that's the reason why we engage in them. They produce some sort of outcome for us that makes us want to do that behavior again. So providing rewards, reinforcement for mask wearing, if this is something that's important for your family, is something that will help to increase that behavior in the future, and then make it less aversive as well. So if all else fails, if traditional masks fail, there are many other options out there. So as you can see in the pictures here, there are mask options that don't require your child to put anything over their ears, and aren't necessarily touching their face. So if we look at this visor shield bucket hat, the actual face shield is kind of offset from the child's face, yet it's still providing them some level of protection. For some kids, the idea of putting something behind their ears, and I know for me as well, having something behind my ears, a rubber band for extended periods of time, isn't very comfortable. So there's this great option of putting buttons, a headband mask with buttons that completely bypasses the need to put the mask around your ears. Another option is this baseball hat with a removable face shield. So again, you're getting a dual protective use here. You're protecting your child from the sun, and then you're protecting your child from potential exposure. And then if all else fails, there are other accommodations. If you do, a quick Google search, there are other ways that you can keep your child safe. If you've tried all of these strategies and they're not working, social distancing, and making an effort to make sure that you're staying away from large crowds where your child could potentially be exposed, is really important. And then one other key thing that we didn't mention in this webinar, but is really important to note and to think about, is what is it about the mask that is aversive to your child? So is it the mere presence of the mask? Is it the texture of the mask, right? Is it where the mask sits on your child's face? Is it the fact that it's covering your child's ability to see other people's facial expressions and to be able to express their own? So the why behind your child having a difficult time with tolerating masks is going to help make the process of getting them used to a mask a lot faster and simpler, because then you can just go straight to the option that isn't uncomfortable around your ears or isn't covering their ability to make facial expressions. So really, really important to keep that in mind as well. Okay, and then again, when all else fails, teach backup skills. So social distancing, avoid those large crowds, practice really good hand washing, and we're all just doing the best that we can. So mask, like we mentioned in the disclaimer in the beginning, it's not something that's going to be right for everyone. Even if you decide that it is the right thing for your family and you try all these strategies, your child may still have a hard time. So we have to look for other ways of keeping our families and our children safe. And these backups are still providing protection from potential exposure.
And just a point there to add, Justyna, on those. So just so the participants are aware, we did post on our website, which I believe was mentioned in the chat box here, a webinar about healthy hand washing habits. So we know that children will oftentimes claim to have washed their hands, and they either did or they didn't, and sometimes if they did, they didn't use soap or what have you, right? So we did do a webinar that's posted on www.thehangoutsspotllc.com for free. You can access it totally for free, about how to teach those hand washing skills. We also had a visual schedule that can be posted in the bathroom as a free download available for parents. And then the webinar we will be doing next week is about the concept of social distancing, but goes a little bit more in depth. So it's really about, kids need to play. Kids are social and kids need to interact with people. And as the world goes back to normal, we need our children to have those experiences to continue to grow and develop. Now, that being said, with some of the guidelines, children will need to learn to play a little bit differently, right? So they will need to learn to play safely to play from a safe social distance. So we've developed some strategies that are very kid-friendly, very fun and engaging, that will help children to continue to have those social interactions with other people while maintaining adherence to those guidelines that we're going to see popping up in the community. So just 2 points there. So I think we're ready for questions. If anybody has any questions for us, I think you guys wanted them to use the Q&A feature here, right? Not the chat. So
I'm trying to figure out how to open up the Q&A on my on my side here so I can see it.
I can read them to you as they oh look, my notifications are going out. I'll read them to you as they come in if anyone has any.
Sounds good.
Need those elevator music again. Waiting music.
All right, well, I think we should invent it and come up with like a plugin or something.
That's brilliant. And
that's a good idea.
And then we'll make millions off of elevator music.
So funny that it's just not here.
Yeah.
Everything else is here.
Yeah.
Video, screens,
Doorbells.
I know.
This was so helpful. I just remember
Yes,
how
thank you.
getting my middle guy to put on socks and shoes. This is going to be a really monumental task for parents.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's so different, and it's something we as a culture tend to not have a lot of experience with. So it's definitely a challenge, but hopefully with some good strategies in place, a lot of patience, families will be able to get there. Thank you, Dina. I'm so glad this was helpful. So I don't think we have any questions and answers. Should we?
Well, thank you both so much again. The creativity, and I love the ideas of just keeping mindful of the fact that these are little children and keeping the concept of playfulness involved in this process, because you're absolutely right. It is terrifying and scary, but we also look at everything through a very adult lens. And it's really how we frame it to children, how they're going to perceive it. So I think such an important point to make it, to make it fun, because for them, they're little, like it's important and it's serious, but it could also be something that they can have some fun with, and that's okay too.
Absolutely. It's so true. So here at the Hangout Spot, we're all about fun. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So play is our thing, and we couldn't, we really tried to find ways to make all learning play and fun and engaging, because that's how kids learn, right? If you make this that they don't want to be a part of, they're going to demonstrate problem behavior. But if you make it fun and you make it playful, you're going to see progress. We did have one question pop up here from Mary. I'm wondering if you can point to any resources that say what situations in which kids should be wearing masks, playing outside if they're more than 6 feet away, et cetera. So I think, and Justyna, jump in here if you have other thoughts, but I think we would really defer to the CDC guidelines on that, and certainly the state guidelines, and depending on who's tuning in from where, if anyone's from out of state, there may be different guidelines in different places. But yes, I mean, the 6 feet away tends to be the standard. So if your child is going to be in a social situation, or any situation, I suppose, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be social, where they're going to be within 6 feet of another person, the CDC recommendation and the state recommendation was to wear a mask unless you have one of those exemptions. So in our next webinar, we'll do some talking about how, how you can play from more than 6 feet away, because there are ways to do that in a very engaging, very motivating way. And we will go through some of those strategies with you guys, but I think the general guidelines out there are really about distance and any situation in which that's happening.
Yeah, so. I agree with you, and it'll be interesting because I'm actually trialing with my own daughter a social distance play date outside this weekend, because she's really been missing her friends, just like all kids have. And a summer without camps and a summer without opportunities to interact with peers is really tough. The thought of me having her go through a summer like that is tough. So I can't imagine what it's like for her actually going through it. So we were successfully able to set up a play date that's going to take place outside, and we've structured all sorts of games, cooperative in nature, that don't require the sharing of materials, where they can still have fun, interact. Hopefully the weather will hold up. But there are definitely ways to do that. And we're excited to be able to share with everyone on our webinar next week.
And just so our viewers know, the webinar next week is Tuesday, June 9th, and it is Teaching Kids to Play from a Safe Social Distance with Meghan and Justyna again. This has been really great. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys. It was
Everyone.
so here. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I don't see any more questions, so I think we're gonna just maybe end our day. All right, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Meghan and Justyna.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.